There we go, Councillor Lucy, we should be live.
Okay, thank you, Kath. Well, welcome members and welcome members of the public who are joining us. Apologies for the delay in the start of the meeting, but we've had some technical issues. I wasn't expecting to chair this meeting, so I hope you'll bear with me, and the chair or vice chair may join us very shortly. So can I ask if there are any apologies for today's meeting, please?
I've received apologies from Councillor Jackie Charlton, portfolio holder.
Thank you. And do we have any disclosures of interest, please?
Sorry, Councillor Lucy, just to say the Director, Lynette Level, is on her way, so she will be joining the meeting late.
Thank you, Georgie. Yeah, any declarations of interest? I know many of us are school governors, and speaking personally, when it comes to the school budgets, one of the schools, I'm a governor for one of the schools that we will be discussing, but I believe that we have, we're able to be involved in those discussions as LEA governors. If anybody wants to disagree with me, please let me know. Thank you. So we then, any declarations of party whip, please? No, take the silence that there aren't any. So we then start with the first agenda, which is to discuss the curriculum for Wales, and I believe we're waiting for a presentation on that. I don't know whether Councillor Pete, who is the Cabinet Member for Learning and Skills, wants to introduce this. Pete, you're on mute.
Sorry, it took a while to come off mute. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Brilliant. This first section is introducing the curriculum for Wales. It's a for information briefing, and I'll pass over to officers to introduce it more fully and share with you.
Thank you, Pete.
Prynhawn da pawb, so diolch Councillor Lucy a Councillor Pete. So I've got a short presentation to share with you this afternoon that will outline and give an overview of curriculum for Wales. So I'll just share my screen with you, and then we will begin the presentation. Can somebody please confirm that they're able to see my screen?
Yeah, I can see it, Chris.
Brilliant, diolch, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Diolch. So prynhawn da pawb, for enw Chris Davis. My name is Chris Davis, and I am the Interim Service Manager for Curriculum for Wales and Professional Learning. This afternoon, I will present to you an overview of the work of the Professional Learning team in the rollout of Curriculum for Wales and the impact of the provision on Powys schools and settings, including Powys's readiness to deliver the mandatory elements of Curriculum for Wales and our approaches to cluster working and innovation. Our national mission is to achieve high standards and aspirations for all by tackling the impact of poverty on educational attainment and supporting every learner. A truly excellent and equitable system as a public and common good is one where every learner and citizen benefits from a broad and balanced education. Curriculum for Wales, implemented from September 2022, sets high standards for all, combining skills, knowledge, and experiences. The four purposes of Curriculum for Wales are the shared vision and aspiration for every child and young person. They also guide our ambitions for lifelong learning, with learners of all ages, in all settings, across all communities, engaged as citizens of Wales and the world, ready for life and work. In Powys, all primary schools began rolling out Curriculum for Wales in September 2022. Crickhowell, Llanidloes and Maes y Ddewin High Schools, Brohyddgyn and Llanfyllin all-age schools, and Penmaes Special School also opted to begin teaching Curriculum for Wales back in September 2022. All of the remaining schools in Powys then started to roll out Curriculum for Wales for all learners up to and including Year 8 from September 2023. At Pedwyn Deben, the 4 purposes in Curriculum for Wales should be the starting point and aspiration for a school's curriculum design. Ultimately, the aim of a school's curriculum is to support its learners to become ambitious, capable learners, ready to learn throughout their lives, enterprising, creative contributors, ready to play a full part in life and work, ethical, informed citizens of Wales and the world, and healthy, confident individuals ready to lead fulfilling lives as value members of society. The 4 purposes strongly align with the Powys Corporate and Strategic Equality Plan, Stronger, Fairer, Greener, and it supports the notions that we will be stronger by succeeding together with our communities and our people, and that all are well connected socially and are personally and economically resilient, and supports a fairer Powys, which is working to tackle poverty and inequality. The 4 purposes are made up of 33 characteristics. When schools plan learning experiences for their learners, these characteristics should underpin the learning design and become part of the learning intention. All schools in Powys have received purposeful planning training from the Powys Professional Learning Team on how to design learning experiences that are underpinned by these mandatory 4 purposes. At Curriculum i Gymru, the Curriculum for Wales framework helps practitioners to develop a more integrated approach to learning. The 6 areas of learning and experience, or 6 AOLEs, are expressive arts, health and well-being, humanities, languages, literacy and communication, mathematics and numeracy, and science and technology. These 6 areas bring familiar disciplines together and encourage strong and meaningful links across the different areas. Individual disciplines still play an important role, especially as learners progress and begin to specialise. The Curriculum for Wales guidance promotes collaboration and cross-disciplinary planning, learning and teaching, both within and across these 6 areas of learning and experience. This will enable our learners to make connections and build upon their learning, combining and strengthening a range of skills, knowledge and experiences which will allow them to realise the shared vision of the 4 purposes. Within the 6 areas of learning and experience, there are 27 mandatory statements of what matters. These statements of what matters ensure a level of consistency in curriculum design across schools and settings, and learners must develop an understanding of all 27 statements. The process of exploring and revisiting these statements enables learners to develop a deeper knowledge of the learning continuum and to progress to a more sophisticated understanding of the knowledge, of the skills and experiences in each of the 6 areas. This more sophisticated understanding allows learners to value how their learning contributes to these ideas and why it is important, rather than simply being able to recall isolated facts without understanding the context. Progression within this learning should be supported by a variety of assessment approaches which enable the learner and the practitioner to understand where a learner is at in their learning and what they need to do next in order to make progress. All schools and clusters in Powys have received training from the professional learning team in how to design a curriculum that allows learners to make progress in the 27 statements of what matters, as well as professional learning around how this progression should be assessed. Building on the 4 purposes and the statements of what matters, we have the principles of progression. These mandatory principles of progression articulate the ways in which learners make progress in their learning and contribute to the 4 purposes. This means that progression must be embedded into learning and teaching and should form the basis of thinking when schools are designing and planning their curriculum. Progression is further supported by descriptions of learning, which provide guidance on how learners should progress within each of the 27 statements of what matters as they journey through the continuum of learning. These are arranged in 5 progression steps, which provide reference points for the pace of progression. These expectations articulated in the progression steps are expressed from the learner's perspective and are framed broadly so that learners can sustain learning over a series of years. The progression steps are not designed as standalone tasks or activities or assessment criteria. While the learning continuum is the same for each learner, the pace of progress through it will differ. And as a result, the progression steps can only broadly correspond to expectations at ages 5, 8, 11, 14, and 16. So together, the principles of progression and the descriptions of learning are intended to guide the development of a curriculum which reflects appropriate progression. Learners' progress can then be identified through a range of assessments that allow practitioners to plan purposeful learning and teaching experiences. The learning that is planned should bring together a range of authentic experiences, as well as breadth of knowledge of skills and knowledge, allowing learners to use and apply them in new and challenging contexts. Assessment is key in supporting deep learning and should be used to identify whether learners need to consolidate their learning, whether further support is needed, and those next steps needed in order for learners to make progress. Assessment in Curriculum for Wales is also intrinsic to curriculum design. Its overarching purpose in Curriculum for Wales is to support every learner to make progress. Assessment should always focus on moving the learning forward by understanding the learning which has already taken place and using this to ensure that each learner is challenged and supported appropriately according to their individual learning needs. And this requires partnership amongst all those involved, including the learner. It should recognise the individual learner's needs and backgrounds of each individual and encourage a holistic view of each learner's development. Accordingly, both practitioner and learner should develop an understanding of how the learner learns and their attitude and approach to learning in order to support them to continue to progress and to foster commitment for their learning. Most schools in Powys are engaging positively with Curriculum for Wales. Feedback from schools informs us that they consider the professional learning on offer in Powys to be of high quality and easy accessible. Allocating adequate time for school staff to effectively engage with professional learning remains our biggest challenge. As a result, changes have been made to the way professional learning support is brokered to ensure the needs of all of our schools are met. Schools are provided with a blended professional learning offer, which includes universal and bespoke support, online and face-to-face training. The professional learning team in Powys and the school improvement advisory teams meet regularly to discuss the readiness of all our schools for curriculum rollout. School visits in 2022 to 2023 have been carried out jointly by the professional learning and school improvement advisory teams. This allows us to triage need and provide a bespoke menu of support to each of our schools. It is vital that the professional learning experiences provided for our schools are having maximum impact, and this can be measured more effectively in collaboration with our school improvement advisors. As part of the Mid Wales Education Partnership with Ceredigion, Powys schools have access to all Ceredigion resources for Curriculum for Wales and have opportunities to network and to collaborate with schools in Ceredigion. The 6 AOLE networks run collaboratively by the Mid Wales Education Partnership provide opportunities for schools across Powys and Ceredigion to collaborate on developing the Curriculum for Wales. Powys pedagogy leads play an important role in the facilitation of these networks, as well as supporting their clusters with curriculum rollout and innovating through professional inquiry. Cluster working through shared closure days and twilights has been a fundamental aspect of the approach to curriculum design across Powys. Every school is actively collaborating within clusters to co-construct a 3 to 16 curriculum, to develop a shared understanding of progression, and to produce transition plans. The curricula being designed draw on local context, strengthening community relationships and engaging all stakeholders in a shared vision for learning and teaching. Learners are placed at the heart of curriculum planning to develop a purpose-led curriculum, allowing opportunities for increased innovation and creativity. Clusters in Powys have made significant progress in the summer and autumn term, mapping out progression across the 3 to 16 curriculum. Practitioners have worked across the primary and secondary phases to map out what progression should look like for their learners in relation to the key concepts of Curriculum for Wales. And for the first time ever, primary and secondary practitioners in Powys are co-designing a curriculum that moves with the learner as they progress through each phase. These opportunities for rich collaboration are focused on learning and teaching to ensure all learners in Powys are receiving meaningful learning experiences. Further cluster collaboration is planned for the upcoming academic year. Lastly, innovation. Powys is using innovative strategies to manage the challenges presented by Curriculum i Gymru. In September 2021, we launched our Powys Pedagogy Leads programme. Using funding provided by Welsh Government, practitioners from a wide range of Powys schools apply to become pedagogy leads. The pedagogy leads are tasked with 4 strategic priorities. Priority 1, sharing their knowledge and experiences of Curriculum for Wales to support other practitioners through cluster networks and inset days. Priority 2, planning and facilitating termly AOLE networks with schools across the Mid Wales Education Partnership. Priority 3 looks at conducting a professional inquiry project, supporting others with inquiry and sharing progress within AOLE networks. And priority 4 is attending and facilitating Welsh Government national networks to ensure Powys' voice is heard in relation to the Curriculum for Wales at a national level. Since September 2021, Powys Pedagogy Leads have completed more than 40 national professional inquiry projects into aspects of Curriculum for Wales relating to pedagogy, progression and assessment. They have been supported to do this by our higher education partners from the University of Wales Trinity St David. The university staff have commended Powys schools for the excellent quality of their research projects and the innovative practice they have shown. Many of these research projects have been identified by Welsh Government and cross-regional professional learning leads as effective practice worth sharing at a national level. There is no doubt that schools in Powys have made significant progress over the last 2 years in their readiness for curriculum rollout. Quality professional learning and structured opportunities for collaboration have been the bedrock to support this change. Evaluation data collected from Powys schools identify the fact that schools in Powys feel effectively supported in relation to curriculum reform. Cluster collaboration in Powys has made a significant difference to growing practitioner confidence in developing a shared understanding of progression. The joint training opportunities provided by the Powys Professional Learning Team and the School Improvement Advisory Team and the extended circle of support offered by the Powys Pedagogy Leads will continue to ensure that all practitioners are able to manage the significant changes presented by the Curriculum for Wales. Diolch yn fawr pawb. I'm happy to take any questions. Diolch o galon a diolch for your time.
Thank you, Chris. That was a very full presentation. I'm sure everybody will have found it very interesting, but there's an awful lot of information there, and lots of terminology which perhaps won't be completely straightforward for everybody who's listening. But I would just like to start by giving my thanks really to all the staff who've been involved in introducing the Curriculum for Wales, because it's been a huge amount of work and really taxing for an awful lot of people, I think, and there's a lot of dedication has gone into that. So thank you to the local authority staff for supporting the teachers, but massive thanks to the teachers who are having to introduce the curriculum. Thank you.
Diolch, Lucy.
Any questions? Councillor David.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. You said that most schools are engaging positively with Curriculum Wales. What's happening to those who are not, and where do they stand if they were to come up for an inspection?
So we are supporting all schools with Curriculum for Wales rollout. We're working closely, Councillor David, with our school improvement advisors through our school visits to ensure that all of our schools are meeting the expectations and the requirements around the mandatory elements of Curriculum for Wales. So those are our focus in terms of our school visits that our school improvement advisors carry out during the autumn term.
Okay, it would be more helpful if we knew the exact number. I don't like the terminology, it's a bit like the inspections. Most schools, majority of schools, I was going to bring it up in another section, but I'll make the most of it now. I'd rather know the exact number. We must know it. And I think that would be useful for the Scrutiny Committee to have precise knowledge of what is going on in the authority.
Yes, thank you, David. I see that Councillor Gareth Jones, the Vice Chair, is now back in the meeting. So, Gareth, I don't know if you want to take over at this point.
Hi, Lucy. Apologies for being late. I was really struggling to make this meeting at all. I'd be more than happy if you would be gracious to carry on, as I've been 100% honest, I'm not prepared for it at all. But if you're willing to, I'd be grateful. Thank you.
Okay, I'll do my best.
Thank you, Lucy.
Councillor Bryn, you had a question.
O ie, diolch yn iawn, Gadeirydd, a diolch, Chris. Oes gen pa hawliau sydd gen disgyblion dan y cwricwlwm i Gymru i gael addysg trwy gyfrwng Gymraeg?
Beth ydy cwestiynau yn Saesneg, os gwelwch yn dda?
Mae yna gyfieithydd i fod ymlaen, mae'n rhywun. Do we have a
Yes,
translator?
the translation's working, Councillor Bryn.
Yeah,
Sorry,
does
Chris.
Chris
Sorry,
Gloida?
Chair. Chris, you need to press on the bottom screen where it says language and click on English. So if I look at the icons, it's original audio and then click on English and then you'll be able to hear the translation.
I don't seem to have the translation.
It's interpretation.
Interpretation.
Diolch yn fawr.
Apologies.
Are you got a question eto?
Yes, please.
Pa hawliau sydd gen plant yng Nghymru i derbyn eu haddysg trwy cyfrwng Gymraeg?
So Welsh is a mandatory element of curriculum for Wales. So all schools will be teaching either Welsh through the first language or second language medium of Welsh. And obviously we've got our Welsh schools as well. So Welsh medium schools are supported with the rollout of Curriculum i Gymru.
Yeah, ond pa hawliau, oes gen pob plentyn hawl i derbyn ei addysg trwy gyfrwng Gymraeg? Efo'r cwricwlwm i Gymru newydd yma.
Georgie, did you want to come in there?
Thank you, Lucy. Councillor Bryn, in terms of there's been quite a focus on the literacy element as well as around the curriculum for Wales. There's an additional element around translanguaging as well. So it is an expectation within the Welsh curriculum that they have that right to that access, that provision, and then it's that school provides that. Obviously, we've got the Welsh medium model of deliveries varies from LA to LA, as we know. So some have bilingual schools, some have complete Welsh provision in one school and English provision in another. So, but it is an expectation within the curriculum for Wales as part of the skills, as well as the cross responsibility skills as well with e-Gymraeg as well. So it is an expectation within there, yeah.
Nes I ddim, wel, nes i'n deall, mae gair newydd I fi, be ar di translanguaging?
So one of the elements is the cross-curricular skills that we have as part of the curriculum for Wales. You've got the literacy element for Welsh and English, depending on the delivery of language for that environment or that school. But within that, we've got oracy, reading, writing, and now we've also got translanguaging in it as well. So that's a new element as part of the curriculum for Wales around being able to transfer between languages. So really sort of in linking to the idea of bilingualism, but also other languages around the world as well.
Yeah, well, okay. Ond just mae'n orfodaeth ar disgyblion Cymraeg i cymryd rhan yn y translanguaging felly yma, ond does na ddim orfodaeth ar rai sydd ddim yn siarad Cymraeg i translanguagio.
It's part of the curricula for all learners. So if you like the literacy element, for example, in the English medium provision is literacy in English across the curriculum and provision. In the Welsh delivery, you know, the Welsh medium school is the literacy of Welsh across the school. So there is that expectation, but the aim of the translanguaging element within the new literacy framework is to support learners to become not just bilingual, but trilingual, etc., and build on that learning across the languages as they move forward in their education.
Can I come in there? Sorry, Councillor Bryn. I was just going to add to Georgie there around in the languages, literacy and communication area that I spoke about when I was speaking about the 6 areas of learning and experience. That idea of translanguage and multi-languaging is a mandatory element within that, as Georgie explained, to provide opportunities for our learners to understand the connections between different languages, so they are more confident in speaking a range of languages, Cymraeg, a Saesneg, additional languages as well.
Thank you, Chris.
Iawn, okay, diolch. Diolch yn gwneud lot o synwyr I fi, ond okay, diolch fawr.
Thanks, Bren. Any other questions for Chris or for Georgie? No. Okay, well, let's move on to the next item on the agenda, please, then, which is the Secondary Schools Improvement Strategy. This is a continuation of a previous session that we had, which we weren't able to complete. And if I remember, we had received the report and we were commenting on that report. Is that correct? Does anybody want to set me straight? Yeah, Georgie's nodding. Pete, is there anything that you want to add?
No, I was just going to say let's pass across to Cressy to pick up where we left off.
Okay, thank you. Cressy, is there anything that you want to say at this point, or were you just awaiting additional comments from Scrutiny members?
Talk about, I think I went through everything last time. I also shared, there was a presentation that I did last time, which was our response to our evaluation of progress against the secondary strategy last academic year. So I shared that as well via email, so everybody should have had that. And then I'm just happy to take any further questions.
Thank you, Cressy. So do members have any questions or comments for Cressy, please? Cressy, there was one point that I don't think I was able to make at the last meeting, which was just about the, was concerned about the pressure on heads and other staff, that the improvement strategy is, well, that and the changes to the curriculum bring about. And I just wondered what was being done to support school staff in that, and to make sure that they're not overwhelmed by the amount of work that has to be done.
Yes, thank you. We absolutely are extremely aware of all of the challenges and the pressures that teachers and head teachers in the system are experiencing. We're working really closely with the secondary head teachers in building our model for school improvement and support this year. We've met with them in person twice now to get their input and their feedback, and we are very, very careful that we are working around their school calendars that they have in place, so that we're not placing any additional pressure or workload on them through school improvement activities.
Okay, thank you. And I did have another note, and I can't be sure whether this correctly applies to this item, but I'd made a note about the order of the short-term priorities and whether that was correct. In that you've got improving standards for literacy and numeracy, which comes after self-evaluation. And when I read that, I thought, surely literacy and numeracy should come in before self-evaluation, but maybe you can't do one without the other. Maybe you need to evaluate where you are before you can make the improvement. That was just a thought when I read. So
the priorities aren't in any particular order.
Okay.
They're the priorities that we're working on. But certainly it's very difficult to improve something if you're not very able to evaluate it precisely and then pinpoint the exact areas that need to be focused on. So we've been working really closely with schools to do that over the last 12 months, so that we can make sure that that support is really precise and that focus is really precise.
Okay, thank you.
Your question.
Thank you. And I'm sorry, I'm not sure whether it was Georgie or Councillor Bryn that put their hand up first. Georgie, did you want to come back in on that first?
Councillor Lucy, yes, I just wanted to add a couple of bits really. As part of our self-evaluation internal processes, that's where those 5 priorities came from, to those tweaks in the secondary school improvement strategy. We then agreed we couldn't do all 5 at once, and schools couldn't, with the, that additional pressure on those. So with an external consultant, we agreed that we would prioritise self-evaluation and skills, particularly because I'd done those skills visits when I first arrived in schools. And we knew that there'd been regression in skills following the COVID pandemic. That was a big indicator in many schools and many recent inspections. So this year now is about using that self-evaluation evidence that we've helped them to collate to drive improvements in teaching and learning. So we've moved to the next priority, if you like, but we're still keeping the other 2 on the boil. They've not stopped, but we've tried. We didn't want to do all 5 at once for the sake of everybody and how we move forward. And they do all interlink. But self-evaluation is key, as you'd said already. The other thing is that we've been working really closely with all head teachers around their well-being. And we've been purposefully planning professional learning or meetings or conferences with them to help them with managing the pressures at the moment. So, for example, we did all the area head meetings face-to-face last term at the request of the head teachers, so they had the opportunity to see each other and network rather than having all meetings online. We've also identified elements that they felt were affecting their work that we've been trying to work on internally, and some solutions for both of us in this journey. But also the other element for us as well is we've got a face-to-face head teacher conference this half of term, and again there's a carousel element to that around specific areas that they wanted further support with, and for us to take an active role in some of that work as well. So we're really mindful of their well-being, I would say, and we've been trying to do as much as we can. We've also established a head teacher well-being group specifically to work with one of our lead SIAs in the primary phase, who's just stepped out of a school and went through transformation herself as well. So she's got that to bring to experience to the situation, and also for them to share their sort of fears and concerns with her as she's just directly stepped out of school. So that's a piece of work as well at the moment.
Okay, thank you, Georgie. Councillor Bryn, you wanted to come back in?
Ie, diolch yn iawn. Dwi'n sôn am gwelliannau rhaglen gwella ysgolion uwchradd. Falch iawn I gefnogi hyn sydd ar y gwaill yn ysgol Llanfair Cyreinion, ysgol Bro Cyreinion, gobeithio bod yn cael symud ymlaen I darparu addysg dwyieithog I bawb. Nawr, swn I jyst eisiau esbonio y cefndir dipyn bach o lle dwi'n dod. Mae gennym brofiad helaeth, os ni'n galw'n hun yn expert yn y maes yma. Llawer ddim eisiau credu hynny. Ond y sir gyntaf ar ei ddatblygu addysg uwchradd Cymraeg oedd Sir y Fflint. Ar nhw agor ysgol Gymraeg yn 1959. A dyna'r unig ysgol Gymraeg yn y sir hwnnw. Ac o ganlyniad, mae pob un ysgol arall, ysgol uwchradd arall yn y sir wedi Saesnig o'n llwyr. A wedyn mae unrhyw blentyn yn Sir y Fflint sydd eisiau cael addysg Gymraeg, maen nhw'n gorfod teithio ar draws y sir o bob cyfeiriad i Ysgol Maes Garmon yn y Wyddgrug. Nawr te, mae Sir Fflint yn gymarol fach, da chi'n cael ei croesi Sir Fflint mewn, allwch chi gyrraedd y Wyddgrug o fewn 20 munud hanner awr o unrhyw rhan o Sir y Fflint. Union yr un peth digwydd yn Wrecsam, un ysgol Gymraeg, Ysgol Morgan Llwyd yn Wrecsam, pob ysgol uwchradd arall yn Sir Wrecsam, hollol Saesnig, dim siawns, dim gobaith mil o ddysgu Cymraeg i unrhyw safon yn yr ysgolion hynny. So dyna bach o gefndir i chi cael ddeall. So, yn awr te, i ddod efo nôl i Bowys ac yn eitha penodol i Ogledd Powys falle sy'n drefawd ar hyn o bryd. Dwi'n hollol gefnogol, dwi'n falch ofnadwy bod pethau'n symud ymlaen yn Llanfair Cereinion, ond dydy hwnna ddim yn ddatrysiad ar gyfer rhan fwyaf o sir. Dydy o dda i ddim i blant o Treganon, a Llanidloes, a Llangurig, a dydy o dda i ddim i blant o Rhiwlas, o Molfre, a Llansylyn. Mae o'n cymryd awr i chi deithio mewn car i Llanfair Cereinion o'r darnau yna ar sir. Fysa fo'n cymryd awr a hanner i 2 awr mewn buses ysgol. Dio ddim yn realistig. Dydy rhieni ddim yn mynd i ddewis danfon i plant yr holl ffordd i'r darpariaeth canolig yno o gweddill y sir. So tra'n croesawu datblygiad yn Llanfair, dydy o ddim yn datrysiad ar gyfer gweddill y sir. Nawr te, dwi'm yn siŵr beth i sefyllfa fel Llanidloes, ond yn sicr mae Llanfyllin yn rhan o'r cynllun cysga, cynllun strategol Gymraeg mewn addysg Powys, ac hoffwn ni wybod sut mae'r trochi yn mynd i gael ei ddatblygu yn Ysgol Llanfyllin, pa gymorth sydd i gael gan y sir yn ganolig tuag at hynny, ac y drafodaeth gafwyd yn yr pwyllgor blaenorol oedd galw ar i'r cabinet a'r swyddogion i fod yn agored ynglyn â sut mae trochi mynd i cael ei datblygu ar draws y sir. Os ydyn ni'n cael sylwadau ar hynny, os gwelwch yn dda? Os yna cefnogaeth i'r trochi yn Llanfyllin yn mynd i ddod, ac o mwy na thebyg yn Llanidloes yr un modd.
Diolch yn fawr, Councillor Bryn. Shall I come in, Councillor Lucy?
Yes, by all means. Thank you, Georgie.
Diolch yn fawr, thank you. We talked about this last time, didn't we, Councillor Bryn, regarding trochi and those elements there regarding the immersion, and we definitely talked about it when we talked about the proposal at Brokerinion. As a county, we do provide that provision, and we are providing it on a carousel across the county as and when we are approached and asked to provide that. We have done that, and we will continue to do that. The other element is that we've got a WESP update scheduled for scrutiny in just after Christmas, so we can give you an update there of the different strands of the WESP, including the questions that you've asked there as well. So in the interest of transparency, that was the plan, to bring the update on the WESP to the panel.
Thank you, Georgie.
Dwi ddim yn meddwl, os ga i ddod yn ôl, sori, Cadeirydd, dwi ddim yn meddwl bod chi wedi deall math o brofiad trochi dwi'n sôn amdano fo. Mae'r caniatau, mae'r gyrru taxi ar draws y sir i plant o bob oed i ganolfan trochi yn un gynllun. Dwi ddim yn meddwl bod o'n gynllun gwych ofnadwy, ond mae'n gweithio iddyn nhw. Ond be dwi'n sôn am ydy creu ffrwd trochi yn Ysgol Llanfyllin, ac efallai'n Llanidloes os da nhw a diddordeb yn yr un peth. Mae ffrwd trochi yn gwneud byd o wahaniaeth. Mae'n dyblu'r niferoedd o blant ddwyieithog erbyn blwyddyn 9. Mae'n
Bryn,
caniatáu'r ysgolion I cynnig cwricwlwm llawn ac yn y blaen. So, sorry, Lucy. Oh, okay.
Sorry, Bryn, I was just going to say, I think Lynette wants to come in, so she may be able to answer some of your concerns, but also I think Georgie's correct probably that this will be covered by our sessions on the WESP, and so we may have to pick it up at greater depth at that point.
Oh, diolch yn fawr, Councillor Lucy. I just wanted to come in. I think it is really important that we do have the discussion around trochi moving forward. I think that the system and the scheme that we've got in place, if we think back 3 years ago, we didn't have anything. Yesterday afternoon, I met one of the parents of the first cohort of trochi, as we've got it right now, which is about drawing in from all over, where I know some from the north of the county in that first cohort and some from the mid in Radnorshire came along to the trochi, and we met the parents yesterday who will be willing to come and speak to Scrutiny, to speak to Cabinet about her experience for her children with the trochi system that we have in place, which has enabled her children, her one child at the age of 11 in year 6 in English medium school, to actually change to Welsh medium, and is now in Calon Cymru, Welsh stream, doing really, really well. So we've got some real success stories. But I take your point, Councillor Bryn, that we do need to extend that, and it is part of the WESP, and it is something that we need to explore. At the moment, in terms of the trochi provision that we have, the capacity that we have at present is with the present provision that we've got. It is successful. It is enhancing our numbers in Welsh medium, but we need to go further, and we need to discuss further. It is part of the WESP, as you say. Discussed it already with Bethan, our new lead for WESP, and it's there. We need to develop, but capacity at the moment is an issue for us. So, but what we've got at the moment is certainly successful as to where we were a few years ago, and we've got clear evidence and impact of that. And I think it'd be really important sometime for us to have that testimony, in particular of some of the parents and some of the learners that have transferred as late as year 6, and we know it can happen, and they're actually succeeding now in Welsh medium secondary provision in the mid of the county. So more than happy to explore that as we move forward, Councillor Bryn.
Okay, dwi yn gyfarwydd iawn ar drefn yna, ond mae o'n drefn hynod o ddrud, hynod o cymarol aneffeithiol. Dio ddim yn effeithio y nifer o blant sy'n cyrraedd un ysgol uwchradd ac sy'n caniatáu'r ysgol uwchradd hwnnw I ehangu'r cwricwlwm, nid dim ond ar gyfer y dysgwyr, ond ar gyfer rhai sydd eisoes yn ddwyieithog. A mae o'n, os oes y cyfle I ddod nôl at hynny yn nes ymlaen y cyfarfod, sy'n ddiolchgar iawn. Diolch.
Can I just come back on that, Councillor Lucy?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, just say, absolutely. It is, but you know, the reason we've got what we've got at the moment is to try and get the spread across the county. We've got the whole county to be able to deliver it to, but you know, we do need to refine, move forward with it, and that is something we'd be willing to explore. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynette. Any other questions on this item before we move on? No. Okay, lovely. Well, I think the next item on the agenda was just to look at the forward work programme. Does anybody have any comments on the forward work programme? No, nothing. I had one comment myself, which was just about school transformation. There didn't seem to be anything on there about school transformation, and I wondered whether there needed to be at least for an update at some point.
Yeah, we agree there should be. We've kept space in that. We had that conversation this week with the chair, Councillor Lucy, because we've got different consultations out at the moment. We will need to come back on those.
Okay, thank you, Georgie. Okay. Sorry, I've just managed to lose the agenda. Okay, so the next item on the agenda was the progress on school balances for autumn 2023. So who was going to present that for us, please?
Well, Councillor Lucy, I was just going to really open the floor to questions, to be honest. The report was shared. We have a confidential session around elements. So from our perspective, it was really, we've got Nancy here, who now oversees school budgets for us, and to take any questions from the panel.
Okay, and these questions, just to clarify, would be anything that doesn't relate to a specific school?
Yes, please, diolch yn fawr.
Thank you. Any questions at this point? Or do we need to move into confidential session? Councillor Allard.
Very quickly, Chair, my apologies. I've never had such problems getting into a meeting before, and I've really struggled with trying to catch up with the agenda as you're going through. Just very quickly, the position of secondary schools after intervention of the finance team, school service, has worsened. Were their budgets were obviously overly optimistic. Do you have concerns about the non-monitored schools as well, whether they're overly optimistic? The sums we're talking about for year-end 2024 they've worth about is almost £500,000, isn't it? 3.2 compared to £3.65 million. Admittedly, these primary schools have improved by 130 odd K, and the all ages worsened, and also, oh no, sorry, looking in the wrong column. But the general message is true. That the position of the secondary schools has deteriorated following intervention.
Can I come in there, Councillor Lucy, please, Chair? In respect of table 1 and 2 in the report, that shows the schools that were requested to submit recovery plans or were either unlicensed at the start of the year following their submittals. In terms of the secondary now in that table, we're actually reporting a improved position from the submittals that came in May. So by 26-27, we were looking at a £7.4 million cumulative deficit for our secondaries by the 31st of March 27. In the table 2 then underneath, that's improved then to 6.5.
Yeah, you're combining primary and secondary schools together in that figure, aren't you?
No, just the secondary line, Councillor Allard, in table 2. There's a secondary line.
Yeah.
And that has improved. So on table 1, the secondary line, by the end of 26-27, there's a £7.4 million deficit projected based on those schools that we were looking at that point in time. In table 2, on the secondary line, by the end of March 27, it's at 6.5 deficit.
Yeah, but it's only in that year there's improvement, isn't there? All the other years.
Yes,
it's gone the opposite way, hasn't it?
Yeah, and there is we've got a lot of schools where we're continuing to work with them on their school balances. So that was a point in time, and we're expecting change after this, following further work that's currently being carried out.
I think part of the concern is that the figures for 23-24 deteriorated between May and September at the point that you'd been working with schools, and we would have hoped to have seen an improvement.
Yeah, if I can just come back in there, Councillor Lucy, if I may. I think that was the submittals we had off the schools in May. What's happened then after that is further work in terms of meetings around their budget positions and what's been submitted following their May submittals, to review what's included in budget plans. And we have had some changes of financial position following reviews of budget plans and challenges around budgets that have been included in terms of those budget plans. So we have reviewed all of them, and are continuing to review them and work with all the schools to get in-year balance positions at the very least.
But yeah, but there's no in-year balance in any of those columns, is there? It gets progressively worse as you go through the years. So every year within those secondary schools and that's contained within that table, it gets worse and worse.
For the schools in here, we have got schools where we are starting to see in-year surplus positions. So you can't obviously see that in the table there that we've got in front of you. However, we have got schools in 23-24 secondary schools where there are in-year surpluses projected. And we're focusing then on future years really to ensure that we get to those balance positions. So the work is continual in respect of that.
Yeah, I accept your position, but the indication from the table here is there is continually increasing deficit across those secondary schools for the next 4 years, and so the liability on the council increases year on year. What does that indicate? Does that indicate that there's insufficient budgets being delivered to these schools?
Can I come in?
Yeah, sorry, Georgie. I was just going to say, do you want to come in there?
That'd be great, thank you. One of the elements there, Councillor Lid, is that's a collective position. As Nancy has said, in the confidential session, we'll be talking about specific schools around that. I think one of the other elements is that we have been working really closely with these schools on these deep dives. We're in the process of doing 2 this week, and we've carried out 4 others. All but one has identified quite some savings that can be made. And there's key themes that are coming out from those deep dives. And that has led to Nancy coming to the area heads meetings and talking to heads around different elements of spend and appropriate spend and use of delegated, as well as, the different elements of training that they might or might not need. We also have the challenge of the business managers across how some schools are struggling to recruit to this position, and this is such an essential position in the secondary sector to enable the head teachers to be as supported as possible with managing their budgets and their finances. So we are doing that. We've also looked quite a lot in detail at the secondary funding formula quite recently, and we've proposed changes around that to mirror other LAs, such as giving more of the ALM funding directly to schools rather than holding it and banding it centrally. And the other element is we've looked at the secondary formula regarding ALN and deprivation. And again, we've put proposals forward that would mean those schools that we have those learners with higher numbers of deprivation would benefit from the change in this proposal. So we are constantly looking at the detail of this, as well as from our end, making sure it's right, but also supporting schools to use their budgets as effectively as possible.
Thank you. So with those changes, I assumed you tested them through the system. Would you see any surpluses within those selection of secondary schools? Because you need in-year surpluses to nibble away at that deficit that those schools have. So with those changes, will there be significant in-year surpluses going forward, and will that impact the £7.5 million deficit at the end?
Can I come in there, please?
Can you quantify it?
Yeah.
We're still working on some of the schools, as Georgie said, with in-depth reviews, which led to extensions in respect of recovery plans. There was also another extension for a school who had submitted an in-year balanced budget, but actually has been asked to go back and do further work on that, as it wasn't a sufficient in-year balanced budget to start to address their deficit better than it needed to be. So there is change going to be in these figures. And we've had a discussion with the school this week where the position submitted at budget setting has changed, and the reasons why that position has changed. But we also need to look at what they can do to address that now, and we will be doing that by having further meetings with them. So they're meeting next week to discuss it. We've got meetings penciled in then the week after to meet with them about that. There's other schools in this list, Councillor Aled, where they actually did submit recovery plans which balanced more of the immediate years, 24-25. And they have also then, in terms of the recovery plan submittals, when Georgie and Jane have replied, have been asked to look ahead to 25-26 as well. So I think, you know, we've got a set of schools here in table 1 and 2 that were presented to us in May in terms of unlicensed or needing to look at recovery plans for future years. But we're looking past that. We're looking at schools who have got cumulative deficits for 25-26 and looking to write out to them in line with the scheme for financing schools and ask them to submit plans about that deficit just after New Year, so that everything is in line with timelines around any savings they may need to put forward to address that as early as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. I acknowledge your team and Georgie's team is working extremely hard to try and square this almost impossible circle. Clearly, the last budget and the scrutiny group warned on this, that the underfunding of the delegated budget at the last budget, I think it was 3.2 million, I think it was, and is expected to use their surpluses to balance the delegated budgets. Clearly, the overall reserves have disappeared. Probably this is more a question for the portfolio holder. We are deep into, or the cabinet should be deep into, almost setting the school's budget for the quantum of the money that's going into the delegated budget for next year. You will always obviously have to deal with the underfunding for this current year and also look forward to the inflationary impact going forward. What have you as a school service asked for the cabinet to deliver, in order to enable schools to deliver services to, education to the children of Powys without increasing the overall deficit any further than it is, because at the moment it's a huge liability and it needs to be addressed. So, question for Councillor Roberts: have you had that discussion, and what are the levels of additional resources are you hoping to put into the school system this time?
Councillor Peake, do you want to come in on that? I know Georgie's got her hand up, and Councillor David wants to come in afterwards as well. Councillor Peake, do you want to come in, or do you want to pass over?
I was struggling to unmute. Councillor David will probably add more, but you will be aware that the authority has just gone through a JICPA process where we have had officers tied in for about 4 weeks dealing with a major multidisciplinary investigation. So we are slightly behind where we would have liked to have been, but we will be definitely looking to passport through all of the funding that comes from education over and above what we've got at the moment coming from Welsh Government into the budget. But we also need to be aware that the funding for the Teachers' Pay Award within England was not extended. Therefore, there wasn't additional money coming into Wales for that that funding. and that award, because of the failure to get inflation under control, was higher than we had budgeted for within the last budget. So that is something we're having to take into account at the moment.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Pete.
A lot of this budgetary work would have happened over the summer. The service would have produced their IBPs over the summer, so this investigation shouldn't have hampered that process, to be honest.
On the contrary, Aled, a lot of the work that we're doing at the moment is with individual schools to identify actual need within the schools, and it's very dependent on the school governing bodies to actually take on board the advice that is being given to them so that we can move forward and also to undertake the work. And that is a piece of work that a large part of it is having to be done in term time, because I'm sure you wouldn't want us to be pulling head teachers in during the summer break, which is one of the few times they've got to re-establish their mental well-being.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Pete. Georgie, you wanted to come back in again?
Yes, just a couple of things really. There were errors, like Nancy talked about, in the submittals, which, you know, our role was then to go back and look at them in detail and challenge that, which we have done, which has led to 2 financial deep dives this week as well. So it's not just about the challenging, we are doing the support like you've acknowledged, Councillor Allard. The other element for us is that we identified last year that schools would potentially, budgets would benefit more from having cover supervisors than additional supply costs. So we did build that into the formula to help the secondary sector with employing additional cover supervisors in a hope for not only to help their budget, but for consistency for learners with staffing. And then the other element as well for us is that we didn't reduce the budget we gave to our schools last year, despite the financial picture, whereas other LAs did reduce their budgets that they gave to schools. So from our perspective, we tried to ensure that we didn't knock on the delegated budget as a whole regarding the financial picture.
I accept that, but the consequences of, sorry, Chair, I must correct myself. The adjustment within the budget paper, I said, was 3.2. It was actually 3.346 million underfunding of the delegated budget. As I do accept what the team are saying, but I really do struggle, and I think the schools really need that information at the moment, because if they want to restructure their staffing or it's a long process, and they need to start that work now, and they need to almost have a clear indication of what their budget is. So from what I'm hearing is potentially staffing costs will be covered. The increase in staffing costs following the pay will be increased. Well, the funding from Welsh Government will come through and deliver that, but nothing else.
I think, Aled, we're in the position where we haven't even had the autumn statement yet, so we don't know what additional funding will be going into England, and we're not expecting the Welsh Government draft budget to come out until the week before Christmas. So whilst we can work with schools within their budget planning, we are not in a position to know what we will be getting. So do we expect us to be able to say to individual schools, this is what you're getting next year, when we haven't got a clue other than the indicative information given to us?
Yeah,
what
that's
the
not quite right.
council will get is a little bit. We've got the indicative, but we've also had statements from the Welsh Government about how tight their funding is. So they remain indicative figures until the budget is published. That's what we're working with. We can't do any more than what we've got. I'm sure Councillor David probably wants to add some more on that around the wider fiscal position for the council.
Thank you, Councillor Pete. Nancy, sorry, Councillor David, I'm aware your hand went down and then came back up again. Can I take Nancy and then for you to come in? Does that work all right?
Yes, that's fine, Chair. For some reason my hand kept going down and I had to keep putting it back up. But
Okay.
Thanks, Councillor Lucy. It was only just to come on the back of what Georgie come in then in terms of the change of position. You know, we've had the submittals. Some schools, as Councillor Allard has referred to, have worsened, but I think it's a more accurate position to where we're working from in terms of that work that we're doing behind the scenes as a team around the schools. So we're challenging what's coming in, working with schools together. We've got some of those schools that make up the balances where actually they've got cumulative surpluses. So they have increased their in-year deficit, but they've had a surplus to do that with. So it's just to bring that up as well, really. But yeah, we've got some that have worsened, as you say, but we've got a better financial position to start off with, and that's what we're working with on them now currently, and we'll continue to do so together.
Okay. Thank you, Nancy. Councillor David, your turn.
Yes. Yeah, my hand's gone down again. Thank you, Chair. I think a lot of what I wanted to say has been said, but firstly, I'd just like to thank the officers from the Education Service who've been working incredibly hard with schools, with governing bodies and head teachers, and I'd like to thank them as well for their collaboration with officers with regard to working in an extremely challenging financial situation. And there are some lights on the horizon out there. You know, there's some good stuff in this report, even though it is pretty dire to say the least. But before we go into that, I'd just like to address this question of the 3.3 million underspend, underfund that's purported to have happened with the education budget last year. I made it perfectly clear at the time that all the money that we received from Welsh Government for education was passported over into education. With regard to what the schools might have wanted and what we could afford to put in there, that's a different matter. But if Councillor Allard is suggesting that we should have put an extra £3.3 million in there, then obviously that would have had to have come from other services, or we'd have had to increase council tax to match that. What he never adds is what services he'd have liked to see that money coming out of, or how much he'd have liked to see council tax increase by. But, you know, we keep getting this, but there's never an alternative put forward. But with regard to the budget itself, we always knew it was going to be very challenging because of the historical deficits that existed. And that goes back to the previous administration. And on top of that, we were faced with an incredibly challenging economic situation because there were high rates of inflation, high interest rates, which were creating problems in themselves. The high inflation rate is still with us. It's only recently dropped from 6.7 to 4.6. And it's worth bearing in mind when you talk about inflation, you know, it's actually governed by basic economic principles of supply and demand. So even though, you know, you say, oh, we had 11% inflation, prices rose by 11% last autumn, now we're down to 4.6, everything's fine. That 11% impact on price increase is still there. All it means is that it's rising now at a slower rate. It's just 4.6. That the rise in prices are rising at 4.6% instead of where they were at 11.7 or whatever the highest was. I can't remember, 11.4, whatever. So let's not underestimate that impact, because it's still with schools and they've still got to manage that. And I think there's some incredible work been going on. And if you read the report, I think you can see from that quite clearly. A very important point in there, you know, and this is a credit to the Education Service again. Back in July 2019, the worst performing schools, there were 12 warning notices issued. When we came into April this year, we're down to 5 warning notices. So, you know, there's some significant progress being made there. They've undertaken 4 in-depth reviews, and they're showing some positive outcomes. 2 more planned. You know, and if you remember the strategy last year, I remember quite clearly saying this in the budget meeting, with regard to secondary schools, the strategy was quite clearly to get the in-year balances correct first, and then we'd work on the cumulative balances. And that's what's happening. Because I look in 5.7 of the report there, and we were talking about secondary cumulative deficits. We've got 1 school projecting an in-year balanced budget in 25-26, and a further 3 are expected to be in-year balanced in 26-27, which means the strategy is working, but it's going to take time. And the other thing, you know, we've got to bear in mind that as far as any future funding is concerned, let's not be under any illusion that the whole authority, every authority in Wales and every service within those authorities is going to be under significant pressure, because we've got an indicative figure of 3.1% for 24-25. That's not guaranteed, far from it. And with an inflation rate sitting at 4.6%, that automatically means that is a 1.5% pressure before you start, if that doesn't come down any further before April. And as far as future years are concerned, they're only projections. We were projecting at one stage that in all probability, we'd be on a flat line, basically 0% increase. That's looking even worse at the moment. We could be -1% or even as bad as -2%. So unfortunately, what I've got to say to you is that these pressures within schools are going to be with us for quite some time yet. And the only way that we're going to get through this very, very difficult and challenging period is by schools working very, very closely with the officers of the authority. That's the reality of the situation. And we can't run away from that. When we'll be setting the budget in February, we will know what the settlement from Welsh Government will be perfectly clear what we can afford to put into schools, and we'll put as much as we possibly can into schools. If members aren't going to be happy with that, well, they need to come up with alternatives. But believe me, they're not going to be easy alternatives. They're going to be very, very difficult alternatives, and we'll have already considered them. But at this stage, we can't say exactly what's going to go into schools. But believe me, all I can guarantee is we'll put as much as we possibly can in there to try and alleviate this current situation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor David. I think, one of the things that we're concerned about as Scrutiny is the confidence that every individual school is working with the service and doing everything that they can to get their budgets to the point that they should be. That's something that I would like to follow up on. So thank you. Councillor Gareth, you wanted to come in?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's been touched upon already by Georgie about the business managers that we are currently short of. So I'd just like to ask, how many vacancies do we have within our schools throughout Powys? Because what we've all just been talking about now, it's such a huge part of being able to work with the officers. Like, I know how much the team does, and we're so grateful personally for what they do in Crying. And I know Nancy has been involved this week, and I've helping, but we haven't got a business manager in Crying, and it puts so much pressure on our headmaster, and it's such an extra pressure on him. We've already mentioned about mental well-being for our heads and everything. It's something we've got to look. So I'd like to know how many are there, and also, have we explored any other possible models? Because if there are so many up and down, we've got to be addressing this at the earliest opportunity. So I'll leave it there. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Gareth. Nancy, you want to come back?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, we've got, not only have we got vacancies, where we're about 3 at the moment, 3 vacancies, we've also got new business managers in post as well that we're also training. So I think it's fair to say there's a significant amount of work happening by officers in terms of supporting schools who have got new business managers or haven't got business managers at the moment. We've got one school where we have got one of the members of the finance department who's an ex-business manager themselves, supporting the school with their plans and pulling their plans in place in terms of recovery plans. So yes, there's definitely 3 at the moment. And just to pick up on Councillor Gareth's point as well, in terms of alternatives, there's a number of things happening in terms of different positions across our secondary and all age and special schools in terms of having finance managers or business managers. We're looking at a solution in one of our schools at the moment where we are heavily involved in terms of potentially the training of the individual in terms of once that recruitment has happened, and any apprenticeship roles that are happening and may be happening in our schools. So, and I think there's further work to do with school service and our schools around what the models look like going forward. And myself and Sarah Quabell, who's here today, will be working on that in terms of looking at the outlook of that. But there's different models happening and support going in place. And I know we've got another school probably with a changeover potentially going forward in terms of business managers. We've already been involved in processes around that. Mary, my counterpart, was involved in the last couple of weeks, and we've also discussed the training requirements to support that the individuals should they be appointed. So there's a lot of work going on. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. Sarah.
Yeah, thank you very much, Councillor Lucy. It was just a quick point to back up Nancy's comments, to say that where a school does find themselves without a business manager, we do try and work effectively together to support that school. And Nancy's given some examples of how the finance team do that, and also from in-school service we provide additional support with things like invoice payment and essential services like that for the school. So just to add on to Nancy's point, really.
Thank you, Sarah. Councillor Allard, do you want to come back? Can you keep it brief, please? Because I think we need to move on, otherwise we'll
okay, sorry.
run out of time.
Just very quickly. What is the latest figure of the percentage of delegated that goes on school staffing costs? Is it getting up to 90% now? Because there's very, very little room for manoeuvre within school budgets apart from staffing. And school transformation is tied up very closely to this. And over the last 18 months, we've seen very little evidence of significant transformation happening. I know some schools have been looked at, but it's just tinkering around the edges. I'm sorry, but I know the committee have asked before for a blueprint of where you expect the school footprint in the next 5-10 years, what it would look like, and we're still awaiting for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Allard. Anybody want to come back on that quickly? Nancy, thank you.
I haven't got the exact figure to hand, Councillor Allard, today in terms of the percentage for the 23-24, but it's normally been running over 80% in terms of staffing to the delegated budget in totality. So you know, like I say, it's the largest part of the budget that we've got, but I can get back to you with an exact figure based on budgets for 23-24, but I haven't got the exact to hand today.
Yeah, it'd be good to see the trend within that. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Allard. Right, I think, members, we need to move on to item 8, which is the exempt item. So we need to consider passing the following resolution, which I will read. This is to resolve to exclude the public for the following item of business on the grounds that there would be disclosure to them of exempt information under category 3 of the local authority's access to information variation Wales Order 2007. The monitoring officer has determined that category 3 of the access to information procedure rules applies to the following item. His view on the public interest test, having taken account of the provisions of rule 14.8 of the council's access to information rules, was that to make this information public would disclose information relating to the financial or business affairs of any particular person, including the authority holding that information. These factors, in his view, outweigh the public interest in disclosing this information. Members are asked to consider these factors when determining the public interest test, which they must decide when considering excluding the public from this part of the meeting. So can I ask members to raise their hands, I think, if they are happy to pass the resolution and move into a confidential. Just allow a moment or two for that. I think we've still only got a relatively small number of members with their hands raised. Can I just, apologies, but can I just ask Kath or Steve what the process should be here?
Yes, Chair. We've looking at the committee, it's the committee members for learning and skills. I think virtually all of them put their hands up, so it's been proposed. As long as it's proposed and seconded, we can move into confidential. Okay, that's fine. Thank you. So I'll because Alad's got his face showing, I'll take Alad as the proposer and Councillor David as the seconder, if that's all right. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. So, Kath, can we please move into confidential session?
Yes, just bear with me 1 second.
Thank you.